for coming. I hope that you find this short session useful or informative, or even better, you find it both useful and informative. I'm going to talk about how we in Dubai English Speaking School have implemented the use of coaching to support the leadership and management and the teachers in the school in organising, in achieving organisational goals. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about how leadership and management and continuing professional development link together in my view. And if what I say about that might sound obvious to some of you, I make no apology for that, because I need to say what I have to say about that to put the coaching that we've implemented in the school into context. Before I do that, I'd like to introduce my co-presenter, Charlotte Randall. Charlotte is the teacher in the school in charge of professional development, and as such she has played a major part in implementing the coaching strategy, and she's going to talk about how that's been operationalised and some of the successes that we've already seen as a result of that. First of all, putting coaching and leadership and management into context. In our school's strategic planning over the last few years, we've always put a high emphasis on professional development. That traditionally has meant that teachers were sent on courses. Many of those courses were actually organised by Charlotte in her previous role as professional development coordinator. Myself and a group of other heads in Dubai about 8 years ago set up a small group called the Professional Development Group, because we were concerned about the dearth of professional development opportunities provided by outside providers in Dubai. We employed Charlotte to address that need, and the result of that was that a lot of high quality providers came to Dubai from the UK and from elsewhere, and a lot of our teachers went on those courses. However, when we actually evaluated the impact of those courses on pedagogy and pedagogical practices in the school, we found that they were actually somewhat lacking in the effect that they'd had. And I think that sort of realisation has become more and more the case throughout certainly the Western world and probably elsewhere as well. So that made us see professional development in a different light. We began to see it a little bit more as a means of really getting a deeper engagement with pedagogy from the teachers, so that that could have a major or a much more major impact on student outcomes. Do you mind moving the slide on, Charlotte, please? So just very briefly about how I see leadership, professional development fitting together. If leadership is about improving, increasing, enhancing student outcomes, which should be embodied in the school vision, then that can only be done by developing the quality of pedagogy in our schools. And that, of course, has a deep relationship with professional development. But as I said, we found these traditional forms of professional development quite lacking in their effect. So what we were thinking about in DES was trying to get staff to really understand the school vision, buy into it, and understand that they have a daily role in implementing that vision by developing their abilities as teachers and developing collaborative cultures in order to do that. And I just want to draw your attention to the last point on that slide. This is a recent study. It's from the UK, but it's concluded that the biggest impacts on student performances were individual staff efficacy, determination to reach a desired end, collective efficacy, and the school culture. You move on, Charlotte, please. Now, performance management obviously can play a part in that. And I know some schools refer to performance management as performance development, because it is about developing staff. But what we found at our school, not just with existing staff, but also with staff who joined us from other schools in Dubai and other schools from abroad, was that when they set their performance management targets, they often bore very little relation to the values enshrined in the school vision, and were not directly related to that at all. So that was something which we wanted to try to overcome, and that's why we turned to coaching to try to do that. Do you mind moving on? Oh, okay. So what we wanted to do was to try to get teachers to have a deeper engagement with pedagogy, take more responsibility for their own development in terms of developing their pedagogic skills, and trying to link the idea of individual targets with whole school targets, which I know from the literature that I read, not only in education but in other organisations, is a difficult task, and certainly I found that was a good task in my experience. Move on to this, Charlotte. Move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so just in the wider context, talking about changing the traditional type of professional development, we identified coaching as a tool for that. We wanted people to be more reflective, to take responsibility for their own self-improvement, and engage deeply with pedagogy, trying to build the pedagogic capital in the school through that. Again, in the wider context, these sorts of values of moving away from traditional professional development practices, going on courses and that kind of thing, were actually highlighted in the UK government white paper. A white paper is a kind of draft proposal that's put before Parliament for debating. And in that white paper, it clearly showed that the landscape, certainly in the UK, and I know in other parts of the world as well, for professional development is changing, where they look to people to develop joint practice, collaborate together within schools and across schools, and self-reflect through action research. To get this link between, you know, academic research and practical events that happen in the school, which is often a gap between. Sorry, if you don't mind moving on, please. Okay, so we identified coaching as an important tool, which could allow us to engage with our fundamental goals, get the teachers involved in understanding those goals better, developing a collaborative culture to enable that to happen, and give staff responsibility for their own development, and again, to more deeply engage with pedagogy. And that's just to put into context why we've looked at coaching in terms of how it links to leadership and management, and how it links to the changing landscape of professional development. And Charlotte is now going to talk about how we've implemented coaching in the school and what effects that's having on the types of things that we wanted.
Hi. So basically at DES, what we looked at doing was putting in place a 2-year rigorous training plan for 2 cohorts of staff. The first cohort of staff started in September, and I'll talk a little bit more about who we've used as a company to support us through that in a moment. And the second cohort of staff will go through next year. Our first cohort of staff are senior leaders and middle leaders in the school. And our cohort next year will look at our subject leaders, but also to open it up to classroom teachers, TAs, our admin staff, so that we can really use the influence of coaching, if you like, across all sectors of the school. My slide up here, the impetus really behind it, Dave's already covered some of that, so I'm just going to talk through this very briefly. We wanted to find a solutions-focused approach to the way that staff were engaging with their own development. And what I mean by solution-focused is we wanted to be able to acknowledge that, you know, people make mistakes with their professional lives as they do outside of those, and to learn from them, but to put a dialogue in place that promoted moving forward as opposed to dwelling on that issue and why that issue happened. So through the coaching, what we actually do is we obviously cover the issue and why that challenge may not be moving forward, but then we put that aside. That's now history. We put that aside and we move forward into how we can improve it, make it better, develop the member of staff, or the challenge that they're actually bringing to the sessions that we have. We also make it very clear to our staff that when we say solutions focused, they're coming up with their own solutions during those sessions. The sessions with the coaches that are running at the moment are not there for the coaches to be directive about the way forward for that individual professional. It's up to that person to come up with their own answers. And we also make it very clear that if it's an organisational change that's happening because of policy that's being brought in, we're not going to find a solution to actually move the change process backwards to suit that member of staff. We're actually going to support them through that whole change process. We want to maximise on the capabilities of all our staff and our pupils. And when we launched this to the staff, we made it very clear that this isn't being used as a remedial tool. This isn't for members of staff that perhaps at performance management meetings are not meeting their targets sufficiently. We wanted to make sure that staff were fully aware that this is for anyone at any stage in their career and that the sessions actually start at their starting point. When we say all staff as well, this is open to every member of staff in the school, not just our teaching staff. So it's open to our administration staff, our maintenance staff, and all of our non-teaching staff. We also wanted to make it clear in relation to the capabilities that we may have teachers in the school, and we do have teachers in the school that are outstanding, but it's important that once you reach the top of your game, you actually keep developing yourself to stay there, because it's very easy if you don't to actually start to de-skill yourself by not self-developing. As Dave mentioned, we wanted to use it to also streamline our performance management. We wanted to use that dialogue, so we didn't want to be going in and saying, why did you do that? We wanted to be able to change our language to what was your thinking behind doing that, and allow the individual to be able to explore those avenues properly with their line manager and where they might want to move on to. It was also important in relation to our vision that the targets were really specific to that individual. Not only were they SMART targets and they could achieve them, they could provide the evidence that they were linked to the school vision, but also linked to their role. Some of the targets that we were seeing coming in was that I'm going to develop assessment for learning across the whole of year one. When actually it was an individual classroom teacher that maybe needs to look at developing it within their class first of all before sharing it with year one, and it was the year one leader that was responsible for the year group. Once we managed to streamline some of those targets with some of those individuals, it actually started to energise them more into achieving them, because they were achievable at that point and in direct relation to their role within the organisation. Last year, with our CPD programme in school, we really focused on action research as a self-reflective tool. And we use that amongst teams to actually focus on aspects of assessment for learning, and they work together as a team and they fed back to the whole school. And it really promoted empowerment amongst our teams, because they chose where they wanted to start from with that development. And so what we wanted to do this year, and our reason really again for thinking about coaching, was to provide another self-assessment tool that staff could access that included perhaps talking about action research, but was away from that side of things if they didn't want to access action research per se. And we wanted to empower our staff to drive their own self-development. Our staff are very eager to learn, but as you all know, time is a massive barrier in schools. And if you don't create that space and that time for your teachers to reflect, then the chances are they're not going to access that, or all of them won't access that in their own time, because they're marking, writing reports, or just trying to catch up with things themselves and their families. So we wanted to create a vehicle as well where we actually, as an organisation, provided them the time to be able to sit and think and talk and move themselves forward. And at the same time, we wanted to really celebrate them as our human resource, if you like, within the school, and our best asset within the school. And we wanted to do that by linking both the organisational goals, because that's what we're there to achieve at the end of the day, with their individual aspirations within the organisation, or their individual challenges that they might have that have an impact on the organisation. So we wanted to look at them not just as the person that comes in and does the job, but also as the person that has a life outside of the job, and how we could create or help support that work-life balance for our staff. And importantly as well, what we didn't want to do was to have a top-down approach to telling staff that you need to develop in this, you need to do this, you need to do that. You know, we wanted to create a vehicle alongside the actual research that we'd already put in place that gives them the power to decide what their actual starting point is, rather than us saying you all now need to universally look at this and move it forward. So we wanted to get rid of the hierarchical structure, if you want, if you like, and give the power back to the staff to be able to access a programme that gives them the time to actually think about themselves. So what is coaching? This was one of the things that we really had to clarify at the beginning of this journey for us, because there's a lot of ambiguity out there in relation to what coaching is. And what was important for us as a school was to define it for how it fits into our organisational context. And we wanted to make it very clear to our staff that it's not mentoring. You're not coming to your sessions to be told what you have to do, to be given the answers. It's all about eliciting that information from them, and if you like, helping them create those light bulb moments that actually they can do this, or they can think slightly outside the box, or it's okay to make mistakes as long as you're learning from them. Downey and Galway are two sort of leading personalities in the field of coaching. And what I'd like to make really clear now is that coaching for us, and coaching in general, is not sitting there and having a nice conversation with someone, you know, a chat to make them feel good and to make them leave that room, you know, not that we want to make them leave that room feeling awful, but we are challenging them within the hours sessions that we have with them to really think about their actions and their behaviours. And it's about looking at how they can change their behaviours to provide more motivation and better results amongst their team, which will eventually have an impact down at classroom level. We make it very clear that it's about relationship building, it's about trust, it's about integrity. So the person or the coach that you're working with absolutely is with you there in that moment. And I'm sure many of you will have experienced before, you know, someone comes to you with an issue, you instantly relate it to a similar experience that you had, and then you try and answer it for them. And sometimes in everyday life it's so fast that actually it feels easier to answer it for them and move them on so that you can carry on and get on with your daily tasks. So for us in the organisation, it's not about doing that. It's not about judging them for the challenge that they're bringing. It's not about us trying to start them at a point that we feel is more beneficial to the organisation. It's them starting at a point that is beneficial for them and their learning. And it's really hard. It really is very hard when you're in that hour session with someone, and very tiring as the coach but also as the client, to focus on someone for an hour without those judgments coming in. So the training is really rigorous, and I again just want to make it clear that we're not talking about just a nice conversation. Together we are stronger. This is kind of the motto we've developed now around the coaching programme, because we are seeing great results, and we're seeing great results for a number of reasons that I will continue to talk about. but we're also linking staff that would not ordinarily have worked with each other in the organisation. Now, our middle leaders and our senior leaders, as I said, are going through it, but they are not allowed to coach at the moment while they're training someone that they line manage. They have to coach someone else within the organisation in order to be able to develop relationships that they maybe would not necessarily have developed. And as far as possible, to not go in with preconceived ideas about that person because they don't line manage them. One of the things about coaching is that you have to be very careful in your questioning that you're not manipulating that person into doing what you feel they should be doing or what the organisation might want them to do at that moment in time. So if you're coaching someone you line manage while you're training, you run the risk of possibly manipulating them very slightly and unwittingly into coming around to your sort of line of thinking. And also that really refers to the fact that we are opening this up to all of our staff. This isn't for our teaching staff alone. Thanks, Dave. Okay, so the training and the implementation. We started planning this at the end of the last academic year, and it really came out of a master's degree that I did that focused on CPD and focused on tools that you can use to develop reflective practice. And we realised that if we were to recruit coaches externally to come in and work with the school, we would be charged something like 1,500 up to 5,000 euros an hour for their services. So we felt that even though the investment to run the training was going to be considerably high, long term we would see a great return on that investment. And as I stand here today, we've actually run 70 coaching sessions within the organisation already. So if we worked out what we would pay an external coach to come in on the minimum 1,500, as well as against the training costs, we've actually financially seen a return on our investment already. We recruited the British School of Coaching. We put tenders out, or invitations to tender, and we recruited the British School of Coaching, who have offices out here under the Training and Development Partnership. And we did that because they offered the Institute of Leadership and Management Programs, the ILM Level 3. And they were actually the only organisation that contacted us to ask us where our starting point was within our own organisation for them to then plan the development for us. And I felt that was really important. The rest of them were kind of like, yeah, no, that's fine, that's fine. But there was no real conversation with us about really where we were as an organisation at that moment in time. And the reason we went with the British School of Coaching was the Institute of Leadership and Management. I'm not sure if you're familiar with their courses, but they are recognised worldwide and they are progressive. So we were starting our staff off on the level 3, 12 members of staff. And they can, if they choose, progress to level 5 and then master's level, level 7. And there are 2 members of staff in the school that actually have gone straight in and started at master's level 7. So in effect we have 14 coaches that are being trained at the moment. And what that did, the ILM Level 3, through the British School of Coaching, is it linked the theory to the practice. And that's really what sort of Dave spoke about at the beginning, was that you can go on development courses and you get the knowledge, but what do you do with that knowledge when you come back to school with the best will in the world? Is it put in place and is it quality assured to make sure you're actually doing the right thing? So we spent the first term as a coaching cohort writing assignments on understanding workplace coaching. So the assignments were 5,000 words, and it really looked from the 3 face-to-face sessions that we had with the trainer. It looked at us making sure that we understood all of the theory behind it through this assignment base. So we had to read a lot. And we had to write a lot, and that was submitted in December. We were not allowed to practice coaching until we had passed that actual assignment. We started end of January, the practical skills. Our level 3s have 6 hours of coaching that they need to do over an 18-week period, and our level 7s have 20 hours of coaching that they have to do. And what we liked with the practical skills was that we weren't just left alone. We read the theory, but how did anyone know what we were doing in those sessions was actually right and not detrimental to the client? So the program is structured that we have supervision. So 3 out of the 6 sessions that we've done are supervised by the trainer from the British School of Coaching that comes and sits and gives us feedback and makes sure that we're actually not harming the client in any way or manipulating them in any way, and that we are building the solid relationships that you need to be able to, and that we're moving the client forward. Personal development of our coaches through both the theory and the practical, all linked into their professional development. So it's a skill that they can take on to new roles when they do leave desk, and that was important to us as well. Through their commitment to it, that they had something that they could put on their CV and show to other organisations that I have an accredited qualification in this. We then spent a lot of time before we started the theory and the practical, putting together a rationale and an operational agreement. The rationale absolutely explored the barriers to this, what could go wrong, and we needed to do that because of the financial commitment we made, but also to make sure that it was sustainable. And as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, as we've had experience in our school in the past, you know, we grabbed hold of something, we put it into place. Gosh, am I good?
Still on.
Are you okay for me to continue? I'll just keep talking until someone tells us we need to leave the building, and then I'll just keep talking as we go down the corridor. The rationale basically had to make sure that what we were doing was sustainable. And although we had a strategic 2-year training plan in place, we also have a strategic 3-year impact plan in place to make sure that after that training and development throughout the 2 years, we start, and we have already started seeing impact on it. We also wanted to explain to staff why we chose a leadership level to start off with, and that was really because of their role in the organisation and their pivotal role to supporting change within their teams. The operational agreement is about a 12-page document, I think, that outlines everything from how you enter the programme, how you exit the programme, what the outcomes of the programme are. It also looks at how we quality assure it, monitoring and evaluation of it, and the supervision. So we wanted to make sure by putting all of this in place, the staff absolutely knew what they were signing up for if they chose to enter the coaching programme. And one of the important things for us when we put that together was confidentiality, and how we protect confidentiality of the client, but also how we can use that information from those sessions to develop further in-house training that might be needed. And so you might have noticed I always refer to them as the client. We have a mindset now in school that our coaches are our clients. We never refer to them by their first name. There are only 3 people in school who know who are being coached all of the time, myself being one of them, Dave being another, and the deputy head who arranges all the cover for it being the other one. And confidentiality comes as long as, and we do state this when we sign the formal contract with them at the beginning of the sessions, that if there's anything that they say that can be linked detrimentally to the organisation, then we instantly have to refer it up. So, for example, if someone's telling me that they collect money for a trip and they haven't handed it all in, you would be challenging them. Are they moving?
Yes. There was a
yeah. They would be challenging them to obviously go and do the right thing, but if they didn't, you would have to refer it. The clients also write up the session notes that come to myself and their coach, and then we draw themes out of those. So when I report back to SLT, I'm using themes. So I'm saying client A came to enter the coaching program to develop their team leadership skills, and they have, through their sessions, looked at their behaviours and realised how their behaviours were having an impact on the actual team themselves, and they tweaked them accordingly, and this is the evidence that we're getting back from it. It was important that we offer confidentiality because, as you all know as professionals, sometimes you're fearful of speaking out if you don't know something, if you feel like you're underachieving. So we didn't want them to feel that they couldn't come to those sessions and be completely honest during them. Thanks, Ted. And really, again, linking back to the overall vision of this, is to build capacity across the organisation in all of our staff, to engage with the school vision, to feel motivated by it, to feel motivated about coming to work, and to hopefully embed it into the DNA of our organisation. And what I mean by that is at the moment we run one-to-one coaching sessions, but we also have started using that dialogue in performance management. When I'm talking to consultants about the potential of coming into work, I use the coaching dialogue now to really understand what it is they're going to give us and what we should be seeing from it if they've delivered it correctly and followed it up correctly with us. So it's about changing the language and the conversations that we have with each other, and moving away from the feeling of a potential blame culture into one that actually celebrates success. Our key performance indicators, this was really important to lay out at the beginning. What are we looking for if we're going to turn around and say that this has had an impact? And this is really linked to the purposes as to why we've done it. And we're looking for staff really streamlining their targets and making them smart targets and achieving them, and knowing what evidence we're looking for as a school to show that they've achieved those targets. We want the dialogue to be solutions focused, not hanging on historical issues, if you like, that the school may have had, and moving themselves and the school forward, building capacity for self-reflection, empowering them, and developing transformational relationships. Really what that means is everyone in that coaching relationship is learning from each other. So the coach is learning from the client is learning from the coach, and it's creating that collaborative relationship with a colleague that actually you wouldn't have maybe chosen to work with. And intrinsic motivation, it's all about raising self-esteem, raising confidence, and being able to look at your staff and know that they're coming to school because they feel that they matter within that organisation and they're actually making a real difference. These are the themes that we've covered since we started coaching in January. Most of our coaches are actually clients as well. So we promote that they actually enter the coaching program as a coach, as a client, so that they can see it from the other side and they can experience it from the other side. And I think it's really important for them to be able to do that, because if they don't know the anxieties that that client is feeling when they come to their session. Role and career development. Some of the themes that have come out is that staff actually really start to understand their role now within the organisation. And if they understand their role within the organisation, they can have an actual impact on what they're doing. Career development within the organisation. It's about exploring opportunities with them and how we can harness what they're good at and use that within the organisation, but at the same time recognise that as a development in their career as an individual. Teaching and learning. We've had staff enter to look at how they put formative assessment processes in place, how they run their APP folders, how they moderate them, and time management stress. This is really quite key as well, because some of our staff were like, we can't enter because of that. But if you deal with people's time management, if you deal with their stress and their panic every day and trying to balance their work at home, their home life, and their work life, you actually get more productive work out of them, and they enjoy coming to school, and they just ooze that enjoyment. If they're stressed, and there's time management, they're never doing anything properly. They're just moving from one thing to another, like a pinball. Project management, we have staff in school that are looking at implementing new initiatives next year. So the coaching program has allowed them to explore those projects and really, like we've done with the coaching, put them into place properly from the beginning, with all the outcomes that they want to see thought about in terms of pupil learning, first of all, before we move backwards and put all the processes in place to reach that end point. Change management. All schools are going through change all of the time. We're going through some major changes within our school, and like I said before, it's helping them to deal with that in terms of how they approach it, how they behave around it, rather than trying to change the change that's inevitably going to happen. And raising the profile. We've had leaders of departments come in that have wanted to look at how they can raise the profile of their department around the school, and we've worked through thought processes with them around that. And then finally, the last slide is really some feedback that we've had, minimal feedback really, there are reams of it, and I was so perplexed about what to put in for you, because it has just been a brilliant initiative, a brilliant journey that we've been on, very tough, and there are tough times ahead. You know, you can imagine covering 12 coaches and 12 clients within a week at school is quite challenging. But we have looked at how we deploy them next year and giving them a full coaching day, so that they're not rushing from class and going all over the place. But we are definitely seeing the intrinsic motivator factors. They are now talking about coaching around the school, and people are entering the programme off conversations that they're having with clients that have chosen to talk about their experience. So, on that note, thank you very much. I'm very passionate about this. I really believe in this and how it's going to